Settlements are being built throughout these valleys. And again, you see the wall and the root of the wall here that is imprisoning Palestinians really in their own towns. Everywhere I went, I took these pictures. I didn't say this, but I took most of the pictures in this presentation myself. Some are from friends, and a few were from websites where I needed an illustration that I didn't have. But these were from my camera, and everywhere you go in the West Bank, you come across this wall. It is part of what an Israeli named Jeff Halper has called the matrix of control, a system of roadways, walls, fences, and other devices which cut the West Bank into tiny, isolated areas and enable Israel to forbid access to any of those areas at will. And there are more than 500 checkpoints in the West Bank. Those checkpoints have actually increased since the Annapolis meetings in November. This is a picture of the wall, and it annexes much of the most fertile land of the West Bank to Israel. It divides communities, neighborhoods. Imagine if your elderly mother that you cared for was living across the street from your home. This is a very disturbing reality. These are checkpoints. I took this near Jericho. The heat on this day was more than 100 degrees. The checkpoints can be moved at will, making life very unpredictable. Palestinian cars are often not allowed to pass, so people have to get out and walk. And as I said, it was steaming hot on this day, and most of the Palestinian cars do not have air conditioning. Many mothers have given birth at these checkpoints. Mothers, babies, and emergency patients of all kinds have died at these checkpoints, many of them. Employers never know if their employees can get to work. It makes life completely unpredictable for Palestinians. This was taken by a Jewish friend of mine, and he said it was near the Gaza Strip, a checkpoint in that area. But people are herded like cattle through them when they're allowed to pass at all. In Jerusalem, I want to take you to two other areas, the mostly Christian area of Bethlehem and the Muslim farming communities of the northern West Bank. This is my first glimpse of the wall at Bethlehem. It was a very unnerving sight to see at the entrance to our holy city. Day and night when I was there, construction was continuing around the clock, and there were people who woke up in Bethlehem who had been able to have a beautiful view out over the valley or their neighborhood, and suddenly their view was blocked with this 3-story high gray cement wall overnight. Here's another view from a friend's rooftop. Now, the wall is built inside Bethlehem. It's not built between Israel and Bethlehem. It's built deep inside Bethlehem and wanders really through the streets of Bethlehem in the area of Rachel's tomb and other areas. And all of this fertile land, the orchards, belong to Armenian Christian families, but they're now on the Israeli side of the wall. This was at a convent I visited, the wall at the Emmanuel Sisters Convent, and a person would come up far underneath the red lettering there. It would be, it's a 3-story high, 26-foot wall. There's a monastery and a winery that I just read about last week that are also being annexed to Israel. I met with the Boy Scout leader on the right and another of his colleagues, and we actually brought some Palestinian Boy Scouts to work at a camp in Rhode Island after I was there. There are 20,400 Boy Scouts in the occupied territories, Christian and Muslim. They participate in each other's holidays. The Muslim Scouts march in the Christmas parade to the Church of the Nativity, and they're part of that ceremony. And they also celebrate Muslim holidays together. Scouting is very much the scouting that we know it, and the Scout Oath is very much the Scout Oath as we know it. There are a few minor differences, but I have those if anybody's interested. This is a Christian family. The father's actually a carpenter. His father's name is Joseph, and he founded the carpentry shop. And his son has diabetes. He's unable to get his son to the doctor in Jerusalem without a permit. This is very difficult to get. Christians feel abandoned. Palestinian Christians feel abandoned by American Christians. And everywhere I went, people kept saying, where are the churches? Why are they not doing something? You've heard about Palestinian refugees. They live in the neighboring countries or in refugee camps. There are about 4 million that are registered with the United Nations as refugees at the present time. These pictures were taken by a Methodist minister who is a friend in Rhode Island, and she was in Lebanon, which I was not. I visited 2 refugee camps in Bethlehem, the Daheshi refugee camp and the Ida refugee camp. Daheshi is a very dismal place, despite all the color. People live here not because they want to live in these camps, but because their homes and their lands have been taken from them. In 1948, before, during, and after the war, at least 750,000 Palestinians were not allowed to return to their homes. They were either directly driven out, which happened in many cases, or were not allowed to return to their homes after they fled the fighting. Before the Arab armies attacked Israel and before Israel declared its independence, there were hundreds of thousands of refugees flooding over neighboring countries, neighboring Arab countries, with terrible stories of what had happened to them. And there was demand from those populations to do something. There were another 200,000 refugees created in 1967 when Israel took over the occupied territories. Many of them were put on trucks and taken to the Jordanian border and dumped. Others were put into camps. Now, despite these things, 3 generations have grown up, never knowing any life in the inside of these refugee camps. This is a typical afternoon in a camp. The children are getting out of school. Women are shopping. The most incredible thing that I saw on my trip was these beautiful, smiling children in the refugee camps. And to me, it was an amazing testament of the tremendous love these parents have for their children and of their very determined efforts to give them some sort of a normal childhood despite all the really appalling conditions that they live in. This is all they know. Everywhere I looked, they were cared for, clean, well loved. There's no mistake about it. And any other assessment you have of Palestinian parents' attitudes toward their children is simply rubbish. They love their children very much and want a future for them. And I felt the smiles of the children were miraculous in this place. When they get older, life holds very little opportunity for them. These young people cannot get to school because of closures and checkpoints. Education is highly valued by Palestinians. Many Palestinians have higher degrees in higher education and have studied outside the area. You may have read that recently Fulbright scholars were denied the opportunity to leave the Gaza Strip. There were 7 of them who had received Fulbright scholarships and weren't allowed by Israel to leave. Most of them have been now, but there's still some waiting.